Dr. James, pardon me. You guys,
Fine.
we got a doctor in the house, okay? The last few years, you've been just hearing it from me. I've been relaying information from our chief scientist over at the farm, but today, you guys are in for a special treat. We have our chief science officer with us here, Dr. James Sharkey. You guys give him a warm welcome. This is his very first webinar with me, and we're going to try and not scare him off of Facebook completely. So just everybody say welcome to Dr. Sharkey. You guys admit he's got the coolest name ever.
Thanks, Jenna.
For sure. I wish that was my name. That's really cool. I want to be a Sharky. Awesome. Okay, we got 1,000 people on. Oh my goodness. Okay, it's going crazy. We're just going to give you guys a couple seconds to go ahead and pile in here. We had over 5,000 people registered. Whew, this is going to be fun. All right. If you guys don't know, Dr. James Sharkey, we just call you Dr. Shark for short. Dr. James? Okay, we'll do Dr. James. If you guys don't know his background, now I don't know if you saw the Business for Home article when we introduced him into our business and welcomed him into the My Daily Choice corporate staff. He is our Chief Science Officer. If you didn't read his bio then, I'm going to give it to you right now. So that way you guys know all about this man. He's not just a paid scientist, okay? He's actually one gentleman with a lot of credentials. So here we go. We appointed Dr. James Sharkey as our Chief Science Officer. He is a veteran of the United States Naval Nuclear Program with a specialization in nuclear plant and steam plant water chemistry. Whew, it gets more complicated from here, so just bear with me here. James graduated magna cum laude from Florida Atlantic University with a bachelor's degree in chemistry and biochemistry with a research emphasis in natural product chemistry. Now you see why we got him, right? Okay, now you see. Okay, but it doesn't end there. Hang on, we got more. In addition to his bachelor's degree, James earned a doctorate of philosophy in biomedical sciences with a research emphasis in cell signaling, neuroscience, and cell physiology. Woo! That's a mouthful right there.
Tongue twister.
That's a tongue twister for sure. Alrighty, you guys. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome Dr. James onto the call. Dr. James, thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your wisdom with us. There's a lot of hearsay in the CBD industry right now. And in the beginning, there wasn't very many players in the field. It was just us and a couple others. And now the space is completely filled with everybody, right? Everybody just rushed into this industry. And unfortunately, not everybody is using science behind their products. So that's what this call is about today. Today, we are going to separate fact from fiction. So if you've ever wondered what all these fancy marketing terminologies mean, we're going to cover that today. So if you have your notepad and your pen ready, now's the time. Okay, here we go. I am so fired up for this. This is so exciting. Without further ado, will you please give us your background? We want to know all this fancy stuff you did in the background in the Navy and all these degrees you have and all that. Okay, what we need to know is what's your background in cannabinoid science and what attracted you to the CBD industry?
Well, thanks, Jenna. A lot of this ties back to my bachelor's degree in natural products chemistry. And about 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to join a CBD company doing pet supplements that also had a human sister company. So for 5 years, I worked there, developed over 13 product lines, handled education, as well as, all the other stuff around it, quality control and whatnot, and just really saw the power and the benefits of the cannabis and hemp plant and the cannabinoids.
Fantastic. So I know I kind of already touched on this, but what's your PhD in? And can you explain it to people that are not PhDs?
My PhD is in biomedical science. The actual topic I worked on was melatonin signaling in the human body and how it affects, the onset of labor in women. And everything's cell signaling. The endocannabinoid system is cell signaling, and it affects, and the benefits come from there. And that's translated easily to cannabinoid science.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's get right into it. You guys, now you've heard his credentials, you've heard his background. Now for our burning questions. We want to know, we all kind of know because we search Google, and a lot of us have Google PhDs, myself included. But how does CBD interact with the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS, as we call it?
Well, there's a lot of misinformation that you can find out there Googling about the ECS, and a lot of bad marketing out there about the ECS. The ECS consists of the natural endocannabinoids and two protein receptors, CB1 and CB2. Cannabidiol can bind those receptors. It doesn't like to, and it rarely does, but when it does, it actually stops those receptors from activating. What it is more likely to do is that, very similar to our serotonin systems, there are mechanisms to remove the endocannabinoids from circulation and from the neurons and package them away so that they can be used when they're needed again. CBD inhibits some of those mechanisms that reuptake it, so it allows a persistence of our natural endocannabinoid system. So it's either a foot on the brake or it keeps us at the same speed, kind of cruise control for the ECS.
That's interesting. So what I've always told people is we've got receptors all throughout our body, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, because I've only learned what I've learned, and you're the master of all the information here. So correct me if I'm wrong, but CB1 receptors are mostly activated by THC. Is that true or false?
That is correct.
Okay. CB2 is mostly activated by CBD and other cannabinoids.
The other endocannabinoids, it's not activated by CBD. Actually, there's a recent study that showed when CBD binds it, it actually slows down the other signaling that may be happening via CBD, that is CB2, that's going on in the cell. So it's actually doesn't really activate, it blocks.
Interesting.
It's like putting a key in a lock that isn't quite the right key. It won't turn and open the lock. That's what happens when CBD binds CB2. How
long have we known about this, the ECS? Because it's only been in our conversation for the last, couple of years.
The talk about the ECS, Meckelin first discovered THC and CBD in 1973, published some papers and studies there. Then the discovery of the ECS came out of trying to figure out why THC produced the effects it does. And CB1 and CB2 were discovered shortly afterwards. Just how far the reach of the ECS is in our body outside of the brain, that's been in the last 15 years that it's really been done. And it hasn't been paid a lot of attention scientifically because the majority of the research has been happening outside of the US because of cannabis prohibition. And that has really slowed down the ability to do CBD research in the United States.
Right. And that's a whole nother topic, and we can get into that. That's a really fun topic as well. But all right, so you kind of already covered this, but my next question was, how does CBD interact with the ECS? And you've kind of explained that. Anything else you want to add as far as why we need CBD to be in our system?
Well, the interesting effect is the other receptors in the body that CBD binds and affects. It binds and affects our serotonin receptors. Serotonin is our happy molecule. And everybody needs a little more serotonin. And then there's these class of receptors called vanilloid receptors. And those are found on our nerves and responsible for pain signaling and other things. And a recent study put out says that the anti-epilepsy activities of Epidiolex may be due to CBD binding and activating those vanilloid receptors.
Interesting. Now, would you say that the natural CBD works the same or differently than the pharmaceutical CBD? Without saying anything you're not allowed to say?
Without saying anything that I'm not allowed to say. Sorry, I'm going to adjust my glasses. They're sliding down my nose. In a purified isolate form, CBD is a crystal, and that is very difficult for the body to absorb. So when you put it into a more natural, say an oil or some other carrier, or even a cream, the fats and other molecules in there that will help carry the CBD into the body. And so I would say that a natural versus a hyper-purified isolate is far better way to go.
Interesting. Okay, you guys heard that, right? Write that one down. Okay, next question. There's a lot of CBD products in the marketplace right now. What should consumers be looking for when they're analyzing CBD products?
First thing you can always do with any company is look at their marketing and what they're saying. There are a very defined set of rules, which Jenna warned me not to break any of them when answering the last question. And you will see stuff like pain cream or relieves anxiety or, even some relieve hangnails. Those are all improper medical claims and are non-compliant. And that is very important. It really tells you a lot about the company, because if they take the care to be compliant in the way they present the product, that is just the tip of the iceberg as far as the care they're taking with the rest of the product to make sure that you're getting what you're getting in the bottle. That's the next thing. COAs, certificate of analyses. You want to see those COAs posted for every product and every lot. And then also you're going to look at just the rest. Are they hyping up a new technology that may or may not benefit? The majority of them out there right now that are being hyped up aren't really supported by the science yet. And so those are the big three things that I would look for.
Okay, so you would say if a company is advertising lots of medical claims, that's a red flag that they're probably not doing their due diligence in the CBD space. And
absolutely,
they're not current with the times. Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
And you've got to be these days. It's absolutely critical to be compliant. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I've actually seen on other companies' websites that's clearly listed right on their website. Even when you go to the Strip down here, Fashion Show Mall in Las Vegas, you walk down to the CBD retailers, there's medical claims listed everywhere. And for me, that's like, I'm not even going to go there because it tells me that the company is not paying attention. And if they're not paying attention to compliance, how do I know they're paying attention to anything else? Now, you did mention COAs. It's kind of uncommon to find these COAs. I mean, especially retail, nobody's posting their COAs anywhere. We're one of the very few companies out there that are actually putting that information out there. Why do you think so many companies are hiding this information?
It's probably a lack of quality control. A lot of these people that are out there are in to make a quick buck. And if you put your COAs out there for every product and every lot, you are just advertising to the world that this is what you're going to get in the bottle. And if you don't take the time to make sure that what you say is in the bottle, then you're not going to want to post a COA.
Do you think the FDA is going to crack down on that at some point? Or have they already taken measures to kind of clean up the CBD space already?
That's part of it. And actually, Jenna, someone pointed out, Mary Axelrod, I believe it was, mentioned ND. And we were going to get to that later on how to read a COA. ND actually means not detected. It is not tested. That'll either be not tested or NT, as in Thomas. So I just wanted to point that out. That was kind of a good point to kind of bring in now.
So if you're looking at a COA and it says CBD ND, that's a problem.
That's a huge problem. Or you may also be like less than LOQ, which is the limit of quantitation, which is the smallest amount that they can reliably tell you. The lab can reliably tell you this is how much, this is how many milligrams are here. So, there's a lot of little things. Yeah, LOQ, below the limit of quantitation.
To go back to my question, do you feel like the FDA is going to be cleaning up a lot of this in the future, or have they taken measures already to kind of put away the bad actors in the space?
They are starting. Being non-compliant is a very good way to grab their attention because if you look at all the published warning letters lately, they all seem to start with, we first began by reviewing their website and found these improper claims. Then they go in and then they show up and start looking at the other things and realize, showing all the skeletons in the closet.
Right.
So they are going to be doing that. And I think that in the future, because they are going to have to allow the CBD industry to exist, there's just too much public momentum for it not to. Quality control, having those COAs, what's in the bottle is what's on your label. That is the easiest way for the FDA to get their hands around it and make sure that this industry is good for the public.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to my next question. With the HempWorks product specifically, how is our quality control and testing standards? Is it superior to what else is out there in the industry? So let's talk about quality control, keeping our products natural, our testing standards, and our transparency. I know that you've arrived on the scene after we've taken these initiatives, but since you've been in office and you've had the opportunity to dive into our products, how we make them, how we formulate, how we do our testing and quality control, what's your take on it? And how are we different than what you've seen out there?
I've been very pleasantly surprised by all of it. HempWorks and everyone already has a system of quality control in place. And we're currently working on improving that and taking it to the next level to a human supplement standard, actually, for that. So I was very pleasantly surprised, and everyone has been super excited about that. So quality controls there. Testing, you see COAs for all of our products. We will be, and we will continue to do that and make sure that you can be sure that what's there is on the bottle. And that's all of the things that made me realize I made the right choice in joining this team. And now it's time to take it to the next level. So really, you're at the front edge, and the direction we've been all want to move, we're going to be way out in front of everybody else in the space.
Well, you heard it from him. There you guys go. Right there. Okay, how do you read a COA? We were going to get to this. Let's get to it now. Everybody's confused about what they're exactly reading on the certificate of analysis. If you don't know what COA is, it's a certificate of analysis. This is our third-party testing that we do. It's our quality control measures. It's how we test everything, every lot, every batch, just to make sure everything is A1 before it gets to you guys. So we want to know what to look for in CBD content, of course, heavy metals, and other things that may be occurring in these tests. How do we read them, and what's important to look for?
Okay, so with any COA, a lot of them now are going to show the picture of the product. They will show the lot number, the name of the product, as well as the company that is providing the product. So that's going to be the first things you're going to look for. You're going to look at the lot number on that, look at the lot on your bottle, make sure those numbers match. So now you know that you're actually looking at the certificate analysis for that lot. Secondly, you're going to, on a COA, will be the cannabinoids and the cannabinoid potency. So it will list anywhere 14, 16 cannabinoids, and who knows, that list is going to get even bigger as the research comes around on it. And you will see an amount, and it will generally be ND, none detected, less than LOQ, which means less than the limit of quantitation, or it is going to have a number, and it's generally expressed in milligrams per milliliter or milligrams per gram. Now, if it's expressed in milligrams per milliliter, you can then take that number and multiply it by the number of milliliters in your bottle. So using HempWorks oils as an example, there's 30 milliliters in the bottle. So for a 750 milligram, you would expect to see 25 milligrams per milliliter. 25 times 30 is 750.
750 in the bottle, 30 per
750 in the bottle. Right. Yep. So, and then each serving is roughly about a milliliter. So then you would divide it by 30 again. So it would be 25 per serving. Kind of works out. The math works out really nice there. So then.
Oh, okay. Continue. I'm going to ask right after this.
So then you can have other things like, THC, THCA, some of the acidic forms of CBD, and that really gives you a picture of what's in that bottle. Is there CBC or CBG, some of the more minor cannabinoids, which are of very huge interest to me. So, and that tells you your cannabinoid content in the bottle. So, Jenna?
Yeah, my question too, I know a lot of people ask this. Can you go over the differences between an isolate versus broad spectrum versus full spectrum? And this may be basic for some people, but we want to hear it from you. And what do you think now is the current trend as far as the regulatory landscape between the three? What's here to stay? What's not here to stay? And what is the best move for this industry, for companies like us?
So, okay, so you have an isolate. So you can think of an isolate as a highly purified CBD. So it's going to be roughly 95, 96% purity or greater. The problem with isolates is that Epidiolex, the approved drug, is also that highly purified CBD. It's an isolate that is then put in to their proprietary blend of delivery compounds in their liquid syrup. So if you're using an isolate in your product, you're technically using an approved drug for children's epilepsy in an unapproved manner, which is a huge no-no for the FDA. So it is just better to move away from it. Secondly, broad spectrum and full spectrum have all the other goodies, the other minor cannabinoids, the terpenes, and then the other biomolecules that some of them haven't even been discovered yet. We just recently had discovery of 2 new cannabinoids, THCP and CBDP. We're still learning so much about that plant, and you're going to find those in your broad spectrum and full spectrum products, which allows you to get the benefits of everything the plant has to offer. The entourage effect is what it's known as.
Right. You know, and I'm seeing companies now, they're like, well, we've got CBG. And they're like, we're not even talking about CBD. We've got CBG, or we've got CBC or CBN. But that's what we've already had this whole time, right? So,
present in low amounts and present in small quantities in the broad and full spectrum. Yeah, they're there. CBN helps, it's been associated with sleep, and CBG and CBC have their own activities and benefits. So there's a lot this plant has to offer. So if you're using an isolate, you're really kind of doing yourself a disservice and not using the plant to its maximum efficiency.
So I know I got this question a lot, and it's not on our list either, but is it true that in an isolate CBD, the CBD content is much higher than it would be in a broader full spectrum because it's being shared with other cannabinoids? What is the fact and fiction there?
Tremendously. You're looking at, so say you have a gram of CBD isolate and it's 96% pure. That means 960 milligrams of that gram of CBD of that isolate is CBD. Now, if you go to a broad spectrum or something like that, a lot of broad spectrum or full spectrum, shall we say, concentrates or extracts, they will generally run about 60 to 80% CBD. So there's a lot of space for other stuff there. And then also you got to remember the process of making the isolate involves purification steps, just repeated purification steps to intentionally remove those other minor cannabinoids, terpenes, and other beneficials, because the object is to get to that purity, that high purity of CBD.
So would you think that makes it more effective or less effective, or just completely different? Am I losing anything by switching from an isolate to a pure form of CBD only to then going to broad or full?
When you're with the broad or full, you also have some of the fats and whatnot, the natural, that come along with it. And it's those fats that actually help the CBD be more efficiently absorbed. And that is, and there's actually studies that show they showed improved absorption when taking CBD after eating a fatty meal. So those fats help carry it into the body through our natural fat digestive processes.
Interesting. So what I've read in the past is that the therapeutic range for an isolate is much smaller than it would be for a broad or full spectrum, meaning the therapeutic range is going to be much greater, meaning you can't mess up when you take the product. Whereas if you're taking isolate only, you better get that serving size or dosage just right for it to be effective. True or false?
That one's tough to answer compliantly.
Okay.
Jenna. But in reality, what happens is that when you're delivering, I'm going to say this, there's a lot of interplay between the other beneficial molecules in a broader full spectrum that of those molecules of potential synergies and interactivities that you're more likely to realize more of a benefit from those synergistic actions than a pure substance.
So you're saying the entourage effect outweighs having a one molecule only product?
Yeah, and unfortunately, we scientists, we like to, when we get a big, giant mixture of wonderful, great, beneficial molecules, what we like to do is we try to pick it apart and find out what each one does before we start putting it back together to figure out how it was playing before we messed with it. So it's just the natural scientific method as it approaches to, complex mixtures. So.
All right, now this is what everybody's been waiting for. We want to talk about marketing hype. We want to talk about the words that are being thrown out there. Okay, so just to name a few, there's, our CBD's nanotechnology, or liposomal, or bioavailability. All these things get kind of thrown around, and I feel like the average consumer doesn't necessarily understand them, but it sounds fancy, so maybe we buy it. Let's get to the bottom of what's fact, what's fiction, what's the truth behind these marketing terminologies. Is there science behind it? Is the science too new? Let's get into this. I want to know about nano CBD specifically, because when I was doing my research early on, I talked to the head scientists over at our farms, and they said there's just not enough science out there yet. And because of that, we decided not to go into the nanotech side of CBD, because they cautioned us and said, the scientists that are making these products, or the chemists, whatever, they're not actually aware of how small they're making the molecule. If they're making the CBD molecule too small, it can cause some issues and maybe not be as effective. And then there's other people that say, well, it just increases the absorption rate. If you make it smaller, it enters the bloodstream faster, and therefore you feel it quicker. But then does it exit the body just as fast? So let's first talk about nanotechnology and CBD, because everything that I've searched on, studies and articles, I've only seen nanotechnology used in a pharmaceutical setting. I haven't found any science backing nano and CBD. So what is your take on it?
Well, Jenna, you explained it a lot more simply than I'm about to explain it. So
that's okay.
Dead on.
You.
Yeah. So basically, when we're talking about nano, we're talking about the size of the part. Now, I want you to think about this. When you think of a glass of water and you drop a couple of drops of oil onto that water, each one forms a little small sphere. Now, if we measure that sphere, it's going to be a certain amount. Now, we make it tinier and tinier and tinier. You end up in micro, nano. But if you don't add something to that glass of water, all those globs are going to stick back together and form a big glob again. So the first aspect of nano is that there are some emulsifiers. And a lot of these nanotechs, to hold those, to maintain that small particle size, use things like polysorbates, polysorbate 80, polysorbate 20, polyethylene glycol, all the stuff that, it's not so great for the body. So you're using a lot of chemistry, and then they'll turn around and say, oh, well, it's natural. Well, not with polysorbate 80 or polyethylene glycol. Yeah, the added ingredients being emulsifiers and surfactants. So now the whole principle of it is the smaller things tend to be absorbed easier across membranes, which are gastrointestinal tract. There's also other aspects of it, and honestly, the CBD molecule is lipid soluble, so it diffuses quite well on its own. But by decreasing the particle size, the theory is that it's going to move easier across that. Now, all the other chemicals that you're adding, well, our body can recognize some of them as foreign, and a lot of these nanos are nanoliposomes, and we'll get to liposomes later. And the body can recognize it as foreign and actually remove it quicker. So in reality, you're applying a pharmaceutical technique without understanding how it's going to work for CBD, because even the pharmaceutical industry has recognized, and the science shows, that what works for one molecule doesn't always work for another.
So it's going to enter your body faster, but it's also going to exit your body just as fast, which means if I'm taking my CBD in the morning and the suggested serving size is morning and night, but I'm taking a nano CBD, it might not last me till my next serving.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, and we have to remember also everybody's physiology is slightly different. So you and I could take the same amount of CBD and have very different effects. And it's not just because I'm much larger than you, but it can also be just because of idiosyncrasies of my own gastrointestinal and absorption mechanisms.
Is that because the body metabolizes?
Mm-hmm. We all have our own very unique metabolisms. So, what may necessarily work for you may not work for me, or it may work better for me and work okay for you, or it may work great for me and not work for you at all. And it's all part of what makes us unique.
So serving size in theory, there is no serving size. It's basically whatever works for each person individually.
There are recommendations for starting, but yeah, you kind of have to figure your own way through it.
And that's true because, if I have people in my family and they take just a very, very small amount and they get great results just taking a few drops a day. Me, on the other hand, I take a whole bunch of it. And I don't know if that's because I've taken it for so long or my body is just already used to cannabis. What's your take on that? Is that because of the way my body metabolizes it versus theirs? Or did I build up some sort of resistancy, or I don't know the word for that, but.
Well, it's, the scientific term for it is attenuation.
Okay.
It is often referred to as tolerance. So, I'm a prolific coffee drinker. I can drink 5-6 cups a day and not get the jitters. And in the afternoon, I would still need, another cup or two to get through the day. However, if I go and take a week off of coffee, I will have one and I will be bouncing off the walls of my office. So what has happened is, because I've drank so much coffee for so long, that caffeine affects me less because the actual caffeine receptors in my body are turned down. The body actually kind of turns down the gain on that because you're taking so much in and you're getting so much signaling. And too much of anything's a bad thing. So the body's kind of protecting itself. So, but if you take it away for a while, or you don't take it as much, like your family who can 2 drops and they are good to go, that gain adjust, that their bodies haven't turned down the gain, or you're, back to the normal response. So it's just the body protecting itself from persistent signaling. Too much of anything is very much a bad thing, is basically what it goes down to. It's a fundamental principle of biology.
Are you saying I could take too much CBD?
I am saying that
Somebody should tell Josh this, just for the record, because when we are sampling products, this man has no off switch. I'm just telling you, our house is filled with samples, and he doesn't too much is a bad thing ever. But
yeah, well, now what I'm saying, hold on, back to your question. There have been no toxicity shown, acute dosage toxicity. So can you take too much at one time? No. Would I recommend doing it? No. So, that's the best answer to that question.
Okay, sounds good. You guys got that? Someone says I get sleepy if I take too much. I get nauseous if I take too much. So I know that just under that is my therapeutic range. All right, so moving right along, we talked about nanotech. Now let's talk about liposomal. What the heck does this even mean? And what are companies doing advertising this? What are we looking for when they're talking about liposomal and CBD?
Okay, so liposomal technology comes from, it was actually, the patent was filed at Duke University for it, and it was used to help deliver cancer drugs. And the principle of that is if you put there's a principle called hydrophilic and hydrophobic. Hydrophilic means it likes water. Hydrophobic means it doesn't like water. Well, this particular drug that led to liposomal technology did not like water. CBD also does not like water. Then you surround it with these special molecules called phospholipids, and you trap it in these membranes. So you end up with these little tiny spheres, and that transition to nano, by the way, that can be absorbed and actually join the membrane of your cells in some cases. So they came up with this technology to deliver it. Now, one thing they noticed when they were first developing it is that our immune systems are really good at detecting these liposomes because they don't have specific markers on it where our bodies can identify it as being, hey, you're supposed to be here. So, and then there was another system that they had to avoid. So they started adding polyethylene glycol residues to it, and they got away from those systems, but then triggered an immune response, which caused them to be removed quicker. So, and they're having to do this with every drug. So one of the biggest issues with liposomal technologies that the pharmaceutical industries are having are a lack of quality control, a lack of stability in it, and just constantly having to tweak it to get the pharmacology that they're needing for, that they're looking for this particular drug. So if the pharmaceutical industry can't really do it well, I'm not sure there's the same resources in the CBD industry yet to be able to really figure that problem out as well.
So if this technology was created for a specific drug in pharmaceutical world, how the heck did it end up in CBD? What's the pitch? Allegedly, what is the claim? And you're saying there's no science behind it.
Yeah, well, one, there's no science behind it, but the CBD industry got very congested very quickly. So you've got companies out there that are searching for an edge to differentiate themselves. So they will come out and say, oh, we figured out how to put CBD in liposomes. And because it enhances the absorption of drug XYZ, substance ABC, it's going to work for CBD. But they don't have a study showing that it works for CBD or that they actually have a stable quality product. So that is kind of what they're doing. It's marketing. It's for them to stand out in a crowd.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's something that I've said all along. It's good to know that that's exactly what you're saying. And just so you guys know, we've never had this conversation before. So I didn't have to call in and coach Dr. James on anything because he's the science guy, right? So it is interesting that what we've been telling you guys, right, has been pretty consistent to the actual science. Because when we learn it straight from the chemists and the scientists themselves. And Dr. James is saying the same thing. So it's very, very interesting to know that what you're saying has been backing everything that we've been saying all along. So now that we've talked about liposomal and liposomes, and in case you guys didn't get that, I'm going to try to say it in layman's terms. Basically, and correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but the liposomes our liposomal technology was created for the pharmaceutical industry to carry drugs through the system. It wasn't working very well, so they added other ingredients or emulsifiers. Is that right? Or is that used in
Yeah.
To kind of to get into the body better. And so because CBD industry got busy very fast, companies were desperate to differentiate themselves from other companies. So they thought they'd try this technology or even just marketing without the technology, which is probably more accurate. to make their products seem superior when in fact there's no science backing it whatsoever. So there you guys got that information. So let's talk about availability. I've seen the demonstrations. There's a company out there that actually used our products in their demonstration where they take a bottle of our oil, like so, and they dump it in water, right? And all the oil floats to the top, and their oil, oil that they put into their water just mixes very nicely. So what does this mean? Their pitch is that the human body is made up of water. So that's the reason why you need to have these technologies in the CBD, because they need to, oil and water need to mix in order for it to be effective. What is your take on that? Is this pseudoscience? Is this marketing? Or what's the truth?
All of the above. I think the only thing that got right is the statement that oil and water don't mix. That was proven very well when they dumped our oil into water, and our oil did exactly what it was supposed to do. Their idea is that they have performed something complex to the CBD, which is CBD is not water soluble, but it can be miscible in water, and it's a very technical chemistry term. But it means it's the making a vinaigrette salad dressing. You can get the vinegar and oil to mix for a little bit. So that would be miscible. Then you can add emulsifiers to that. And so we have emulsifiers in our bath bombs and other products that help, when we need water to carry the oil to the body to be absorbed. Now, what they've done is they've used some sort of emulsifier or some sort of chemical complex, complexing it to another chemical. I think this technology comes from curcumin. A company has made a water-soluble curcumin. That's the active ingredient in turmeric. And hid it behind a proprietary formulation and basically claiming that it dissolves in water, which is technically not true. So now you have your CBD floating around in a complex of something or some kind of chemical mixture. And it's now moving around more freely in water. That's great. But the interesting thing about it is that our bodies are really tuned to digest and absorb two things very well: carbohydrates and fats. Why do you think everybody likes French fries, cheeseburgers, and whatnot? So you've now taken a molecule that would normally be absorbed by our natural process for absorbing fats and proceed to force it through an absorption pathway that is for water-soluble things. And the irony of this is that the fat absorption pathway bypasses the liver and first pass liver processing, whereas their water-soluble CBD goes right to the liver, where it can be chemically modified and inactivated as part of the liver's normal processing of everything we bring into our bodies. Then they say, oh, well, it moves around in the bloodstream better. Well, our bodies, funny enough, we make these proteins that will bind and carry fats around to where it's needed. Again, a solution for something that's not a problem. And then you say, okay, some of the places we want CBD to go is in the brain. So there's the blood-brain barrier there. The blood-brain barrier is water impermeable. So now you have a substance that would normally diffuse across the blood-brain barrier because it's lipid soluble, but you've now made it water soluble, so it can't get across the brain. So you've really created a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. But hey, it makes for really pretty yellow colored water.
So you're saying that by making CBD water soluble, essentially taking the oil out of the CBD, you're making it ineffective.
You're really... It's again, the science isn't there to say that either, but you're forcing it through a physiology that is not what normally would happen. So really now everything that we understand about the way it works in the body and the way it's moved through the body and acts on the body, you've now changed everything about it. So you're going to have some unintended consequences. So, it's hard to say because no one's really looked at it. The companies that are marketing this water soluble stuff, they don't even have data supporting it. So really it's a solution to a problem that doesn't exist to make a pretty product.
It's just an unnatural process when
exactly.
It works very effectively in its natural form.
Yeah, because you've got it in there with a hemp oil, which has plenty of omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids, a nice polyunsaturated fat content. It's enough to carry it across. Yeah, is it, 100% bioavailable? No, it's not. The only way to do that would be injecting pure CBD. So this is, we just don't have the science to justify the changes that are being made to this molecule to make for product differentiation and try to carve yourself out your own niche in the market.
Interesting. Okay, so that leads me to my next question. Carrier oils. Let's talk about that for a minute, because I think, again, a lot of companies like to differentiate themselves by changing the carrier oil. We've always stood by our tried and true, which is we put it in hemp seed oil because it's from the hemp plant. It makes sense to keep the cannabinoids in their natural state from which they came. So we put, our CBD, hemp seed oil, we've got a little flavor. That's all we put in our bottle. Other people disagree. They use MCT oil. They're using olive oil. I've seen sunflower seed oil, all kinds of other different carriers. What's the logic behind that? And is it better or worse?
Okay, so the logic behind it is getting that, it's that fatty meal that I mentioned earlier, the study showing that the fatty meal increases the absorption. You need those fats to carry it. Now, MCT oil, very popular out there. It has some anecdotal benefits, but the interesting thing about MCT is that it's 90% saturated fat. Those are the bad fats. So, and it can also cause diarrhea and vomiting in certain people sensitive to it. So it's just not worth the risk of going there. Hemp oil has a very good omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid ratio. Those are the good fats. A lot of other polyunsaturated. It makes sense. Olive oil, not as bad, not as good. And then some of the other ones, some of the more exotics, you can go oil by oil, and each one will have its plus and minuses, but really keep it with the plant. That it came from. It just makes more sense that way.
We agree. And that's why we've always done that. So one thing that's not on my list that I kind of wanted to ask you and your thoughts on is extraction methods. There's a lot of different ways that we extract CBD. And in your world, you probably understand the ethanol process with acetones and harsh solvents and whatnot that's out there versus the CO2 extraction, which is what we use. Subcritical, supercritical extraction. Is there anything you can add to, or any information you can give us on what's important when it comes to extraction and what should we be looking for when we're picking out a product?
Okay, so with each extraction method, you're going to be having different chemical parameters, which changes the composition of that extract slightly. So supercritical CO2 extraction will have a different profile of the molecules from the plant than, say, ethanol extraction. Ethanol extractions tend to pull more chlorophylls, oddly enough. And then you have butane, which honestly you just want to stay away from. So supercritical gets you away from a lot of those problematic solvents. The additional ethanol that would be done. The ethanol extraction method is advancing. There's some really good, the equipment's getting better. We're recovering, getting all the ethanol out of it. But supercritical CO2 is much more clean and much more clean extraction from a solvent base. And I would just encourage everyone to take a look at that residual solvent section on the COA, which we didn't mention earlier, because look for those ethanol content. Look for, that. And yes, ethanol is used for the Rick Simpson oil extraction. You're absolutely right, Stacy. But you just have to make sure to drive off all that ethanol off. And that takes heat. And the heat can, if you don't do it just right, you can start degrading the cannabinoids. And that is something we don't necessarily want to do.
Gotcha. So while technologies are advancing, that's great. So ethanol is not completely terrible as long as they get all the solvents and extras out of there that may have been left behind, the residue left behind from the extraction. If you're using a CO2 method, you don't have that issue.
Yeah, exactly. Right now, I would put supercritical CO2 still very much in the lead for as far as a cleaner extract. Ethanol is in second, and it's closing the gap, but it's not there yet. And then any of the other harsh solvent based, those are, those I just wouldn't even,
So would you say that the reason why not all companies use CO2 is because of the expense behind it? Is it a more expensive technology to use, or why doesn't everybody just use it if it's superior?
One, it's a cleaner. The one problem with it is that it is you can't do large quantities at a time with supercritical CO2. You're limited on the total amount of extraction that you can do at a single time. If you want to extract a bunch of hemp very quickly, you better off going with ethanol. Your throughput is much higher. But that's the trade-off is getting all that ethanol out, plus you have a different composition. So supercritical CO2 tends to be, that's the industry standard.
Gotcha. So it's a little bit slower, but it's worth it in the long term. No residue left over. That's good to know. Okay, moving right along. What really is the most effective CBD oil? That's on my list here.
Oh, is this where I put in the blatant product plug? MDC, of course, or HempWorks, of course. No, it would be I would look for a CBD oil that is in a good fatty carrier. I am partial to hemp seed oil. Was partial before I joined the company, so I was glad to see it. And then I would look at the everything else about the company that we went over before. The marketing. Can I trust the company? Can I trust that what is on that label is in the bottle? And it's all about the company, all about who you're getting it from. And that's what makes the best CBD oil is the company that stands behind it. So.
One thing I wanted to add on the testing before we go to our next question. There are some people asking, when are we going to have new tests? And when are we going to have more comprehensive tests? I know that that's something that you're working on. Can you give our viewers any insight on that?
We are currently in the process of evaluating a new testing lab. That is going to be providing us with a full profile. I have actually been able to find for our most recent lots of products, full COAs, which do include the residual solvents, the heavy metals, and microbials. So those tests are being done, and we will be posting them in the near future. It's definitely a direction that we've been talking about, and we just got to get all the ducks in a row before we are ready to bring it to the world, so to speak.
Fantastic. So you guys hear that? We've got new testing coming soon, and it'll be more comprehensive than the testing we had prior. So stay tuned for that. That's on its way in the near future. In a matter of days, maybe within a week-ish window.
We'll need to talk to Josh, and we'll talk to Josh about it, and it'll happen.
Sounds good. Okay, last two questions. What do you see in the future for CBD products? I know we talked about the differences between the different CBDs out there, but I know with your experience in the past being can you tell us your experience with the FDA? Just really quickly.
The FDA.
Because we want to make sure that you're not, because we've got a lot of FDA haters, I'll say, on this call. So not that you're working for the FDA, but that...
No, I'm not. I was invited to the May 31st meeting about CBD and hemp to present on behalf of the CBD industry. So, while I'm not a fan of the way the FDA is handling this, it is also good to understand how they're going to behave and how they act so that you can keep yourself clear. And that's really where that's where the future of the industry goes. It's going to be away from the isolate, which is effectively Epidiolex, and more towards a broad and full spectrum product. And then with a good understanding of the way the endocannabinoid system works and the way CBD behaves in the body and some of the other minor cannabinoids, you can start making some interesting new products based upon that knowledge. And so that's a couple of other things that are in the future. And I am also looking very heavily at the minor cannabinoids.
Speaking of new products in the future, I'm sure we would all like to know, correct me if I'm wrong, what's your main focus right now at My Daily Choice? And what kind of exciting plans do you have for us as far as new products coming?
Well, as far as new products, I've got a couple in the pipeline right now. And these do take a little bit of time because every product starts as, okay, what do we want to do with it? Then screening a whole cornucopia of ingredients. Then finding someone to make the product and getting the samples, and then making sure that those samples work and they're safe. And then we do the labeling, the packaging, and all the marketing, and then it's ready for prime time. So these things it's an involved process because you want every product to be two things. You want it to work and you want it to be safe. And every product I've ever developed and will develop will work and will be safe. And I've got a couple of things in the pipeline. I can't really talk about them right now or else you would get mad at me. I've got to give you something to talk about at conventions and at the roadshows. And these will be not only U.S. products, but international as well. We've got some big things in the works for 2020 as a company, and not just as a...
What I'm hearing you say is you're working on some exclusive dynamite, never been done before, amazing products that we're going to bring to market in the next year.
Oh, yeah. Yep, that is the goal.
You guys heard it here, straight from the man. And with that, we're going to wrap that up. We're right on the hour. Thank you, Dr. James, for hopping on and sharing all your wisdom with us. It's been an amazing experience for all of us. We all feel a little bit smarter thanks to you. So thanks again for hopping on, and thank you guys for hopping on with us. We will see you on our next call.
Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, everybody.